Hello, my friends. My name is Darren Gerdes. If you're looking for Ukraine war news, you're in the right place. This is the Daily Brief. So, 1,130 Russians off the battlefield, 10 tanks, 12 armored combat vehicles, 48 artillery pieces. And we're going to come back to that in just a moment. 47 vehicles and fuel tanks, 7 special equipment. Now, the number that I want to show you is really interesting. I just saw this from the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. 14,000 artillery pieces. Since the beginning of the war, you're over 14,000 artillery pieces as of today. That's just it's hard to wrap your mind around that much destruction. Okay, Andrew Perpetua's list was fascinating today too. Here are the losses I could identify for yesterday. He says, I can't remember if this is a record number, but it's close. Look at this. Look at this list of Russian to Ukrainian losses. This is like, wow. 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 Okay, so the blue is Ukrainian losses. Let's go back up. About one, about two, about three, about four, maybe about 5 times the Russian losses to Ukrainian losses here. That's pretty significant. But the big story today wasn't on the battlefield, even though Zaporizhia region 379 times attacked over the day. Like that's just one region, and so you multiply that by, all the other oblasts that are being attacked. And then Ukrainian fighters on the 3rd Operational Battalion Spartan captured 3 Russian occupiers near Kharkiv Oblast who got lost in the area. Russians shared that their main motivation to fight against Ukraine was exclusively money. So you'll never fight the same way for money as a mercenary as you will when you're defending your homeland, defending your wives and children. So Ukrainians imprisoned Russian invaders when captured, in contrast to a recent video that I didn't talk about yesterday. I was conflicted about this. How do I talk about this on YouTube? A video of Russian soldiers killing Ukrainian prisoners of war, and you can look up what you see here, and it was bad. It was barbaric, and I didn't talk about it for a reason, because of YouTube censors. Finnish intel: Russian bases near the border are stripped for the Ukrainian war. And I found this to be really interesting because, okay, so Russia had threatened Finland over its intentions to join NATO even before Helsinki had definitely decided to apply. The Russian ministry promising a responsive military, technical, and other nature. Despite Russia intimidating Finland with consequences if it joined NATO and promising to increase its military presence near the border, for now the military bases in this region are emptier than a year ago. On average, 80% of the equipment and soldiers have been redeployed to the war against Ukraine. Well, wait a minute. I thought NATO was a threat to Russia, and Finland joining NATO was, we're going to bolster the border. Well, according to Jay in Kiev, it's interesting how Russia only loses interest in threatening a country once they've joined NATO. Precisely. This is why Ukraine was attacked and other countries weren't, right? If Ukraine was part of NATO, none of this would have happened. None of it. Okay. All right. So Russian Parliament has recommended the Prosecutor General's Office and the FSB to initiate the recognition of Ukrainian Armed Forces, Security Services, and Main Directorate of Intelligence as terrorist organizations. Now, how can they be this kind of organization? I'm not going to even repeat the word again, just because I probably shouldn't have said it the first time for YouTube censors, but aggressors call the victims T's? Really? So the army, so it's not just army, it's one army fighting T's, right? And the victims are the T's, not the aggressors, which is fascinating to my mind that they would contort themselves in this way. But then they've done this legally, and when they do this legally, then somehow they put on this cloak, this garb of legality, and then act as if everything's kosher. Here's another example of that same kind of thing. Russia's decision to place Western officials on its wanted list is part of its effort to violate sovereignty of NATO member states. So here, the Russian government is charging Ukrainian servicemen and military officials with crimes in absentia as part of its efforts to reinforce Russian federal law outside of its jurisdiction. How do you do that? and insinuate that Ukraine should not exist as an independent state. The Institute for the Study of War reports on June 18th, that's yesterday. The Russian Ministry of Internal Affairs placed former Ukrainian Deputy Defense Minister and former Deputy Chief of the Ukrainian General Staff on its wanted list on June 18th and charged the men with unspecified war crimes in absentia. Okay, so we don't even know what the crimes are, but they're placed on this list. And it got worse because President Zelensky and former President Poroshenko were also temporarily on this list as well. Finally, the ISW continues to assess that Russia's decision to place Western officials on its wanted list for violating Russian federal laws outside of Russia is part of an effort to violate the sovereignty of NATO member states and justify possible future aggression against NATO. Okay, so that's what's going on here. It's very, very strange how you dress things up in legality, even if it's completely absurd and illegal and breaks every rule of international law. In the meantime, Tallinn, that's Estonia's, Tallinn is ready to talk about sending Estonian troops to Ukraine. The Estonian ambassador to Ukraine has said, "This is not a red line for us. We hope for a common position from NATO or the EU, and our leaders, especially the defense ministry, are discussing this and recently said that nothing is impossible for us." Estonia's got guts, and Estonia is right there on the border, and there's a reason that the Baltic states and Poland are particularly hawkish. Okay. 32% of all chatbot responses are pushing Russian propaganda. Now, I saw this on Twitter and then I followed it to the actual article. And okay, so that is what's happening. Leading chatbots, including ChatGPT, Google Gemini, Meta AI, are generating and disseminating Russian disinformation narratives, according to the findings of a NewsGuard study published on Axios on June 18th. The study found that chatbots responded with Russian propaganda about a third of the time, citing fake news sites as if they were credible sources. Okay, so what that tells me, and I've written some papers and done some presentations about AI with a colleague at my institution, and so what that tells me is that about 32% or about a third of what's out there, because what ChatGPT does is it just tries to predict. It's a large language model that tries to predict what's out there based on what we already know. So about a third of the information, unless it's trained otherwise, about a third of the information that exists is going to be Russian disinformation. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. The study found that chatbots responded with Russian propaganda 32% of the time, citing fake news. Among the chatbots' false claims were fake news about a Ukrainian troll factory interfering with U.S. elections. Russian propaganda is just so funny what a weird mirroring effect it is. Like whatever we're doing, we say that you're doing. Okay, let's keep moving along. In RT, I saw this gem of an article. Excuse me, I still have a bit of a sore throat. Another African state to apply for BRICS membership. They love showing the BRICS are getting bigger. Well, I mean, but really, the move will allow landlocked Zimbabwe to strengthen economic ties with like-minded nations, the minister says. Zimbabwe, like many other countries represented here, has strong convictions in BRICS' potential to counterbalance Western powers' dominance by challenging their unilateral decision-making and promoting a more balanced global landscape. That most of them couldn't care less about that. Most of the BRICS are just wanting to trade and grow and that sort of thing. Now, if you look at Putin touts the BRICS as if it's somehow an alternative to the G7. Here's Zimbabwe, by the way, if you didn't know where it was. You knew it was somewhere in Africa, but you couldn't figure out where it was in your mental map in your head. BRICS and G7 countries in the global economy. It looks pretty small to pretty big, and there is something to that. But when you look at the GDP, the gross domestic product, the aggregate gross domestic product of the G7 member states, not including the EU, it's not even the whole EU, it's just the top 7 nations, is 43% of global economy in nominal terms. Now, if you compare that against the BRICS, which is far larger in land, combined, the BRICS bloc has a GDP of 25.85 trillion. And China is 16.86 trillion of that. So you take China out and you're below $10 trillion as opposed to the 43% of world trade or world economy. Okay, really? Now look at this. This is BRICS Plus. Now look at this map. Don't worry about South America for right now. Just look at Africa and Asia. Look at this BRICS map. And then, I thought, wow, that looks surprisingly like some other map that I saw. What's this map? Well, this is a map of the most authoritarian versus the most democratic countries in the world. The more red and orange you are, the more authoritarian your countries are, and the more yellow and green you are, the more democratic you are. How about that? Let's look at it again. BRICS, authoritarian. BRICS, authoritarian. What do you notice? It's pretty interesting. Okay, let's move on. Now, in the EU, Hungary is continuing to use every opportunity to destroy Putin. Orban has chosen the slogan, make Europe great again for its 6-month EU presidency. Okay, Hungary tends to be the outlier over there with this kind of thing. Now, and like MAGA, I want to see America great, but I don't use that term because there's so many connotations related to Trump and just some negative things that you just don't want to touch that, even if I do want to see my country be a great country. So there we are. Okay, last little bit. I'm just fascinated by drone aerial combat, and this was another one just today. And tell me if you don't want to see this, because if you don't want to see it, I won't show it. But wow, Andrew Perpetua has been posting a number of these, and I just find it really interesting. Last little bit, I put this on a poll, fictional scenario. If my channel, that's Professor Gerdes Explains, if my channel was taken over by a Russian troll who looked like me, sounded like me, and was pretending to be me, how would you detect the difference? And I thought for sure the first answer would be it. He would pronounce things correctly. He wouldn't speak fast enough. Okay, maybe. He would confuse traditional values with traditional Russian traditional values. That was the leading answer that you chose. I don't think that the Russians are very good at actually showing what the showing a fair comparison of that. Or he couldn't stand being polite long enough for the ruse to work is with his second largest. But yeah, I think this is it because and I think that there's something really significant to this. If American Christians particularly, but others who Orthodox Jews or others who are or tuned into traditional values, if they really understood what traditional Russian values were, they wouldn't be swallowing that hook, line, and sinker. Okay, that's all that I have today. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person who cares about Ukraine.